Hi, Screen Time Stories here. Today I'm going to explain a comedy, adventure, and sci-fi film called Idiocracy. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Joe Bowers, an army librarian who is being replaced with an intern. Corporal Joe is identified as the army's most average soldier, with no family ties. Joe is considered an ideal candidate for the military's human hibernation project. Rita, a prostitute who is afraid of her boyfriend, Upgrade, is also selected. Upgrade agrees to let Rita participate in the experiment in exchange for favors from the military. Joe and Rita are chosen for the military hibernation project, which aims to preserve soldiers at their prime until they are needed most. Both Joe and Rita, having no family, are seen as the perfect candidates since their absence wouldn't raise any questions if something goes wrong. As the experiment begins, Joe learns about Rita's profession. She vaguely describes her work as a little of this and a little of that. Joe admires her, saying he envies people who can make a living that way. Rita, terrified by the process, starts to panic, but Joe reassures her that everything is safe, mentioning that the experiment has been tested on dogs and other animals. They are sealed in their hibernation chambers, intended to be awakened a year later. However, the experiment is quickly forgotten when the officer in charge, Colonel Collins, is arrested for running his own prostitution ring under Upgrade's guidance. Consequently, the base is shut down, leaving Joe and Rita in their hibernation chambers indefinitely. 500 years in the future, Joe and Rita's hibernation chambers are accidentally opened. By this time, mankind has become frighteningly stupid, to the point where humanity can no longer solve even the most basic problems, like garbage, which had been stacked for centuries with no plans whatsoever, leading to the greatest garbage avalanche of 2505, reviving both of them. Joe crashes into the house of Frito, a typical clueless citizen of the American future, whose dwelling is full of junk food with a prominent giant television screen that is covered with adverts. Frito is watching Ow My Balls, a popular TV program. When Joe wakes up, he has no idea where he is. He asks Frito for information, but Frito, annoyed and confused, throws Joe out of his house. Unaware of the year, Joe wanders the streets, desperate for help. He could understand the people around him, but when he spoke in his normal voice, he sounded pompous and strange to them. Joe eventually found a hospital. When he opened the tap to drink water, he was shocked to see a green liquid instead. He stopped a passing man and asked where he could find water. The man laughed at him and explained that water is only used in toilets, leaving Joe in disbelief. Joe makes his way to Dr. Lexus's office and explains the experiment he was part of, but the doctor doesn't take him serious, diagnosing him as simply tarded and fucked up. Dr. Lexus panics upon discovering that Joe has no barcode tattoo on his left wrist, which means he cannot be scanned for automatic debit payment. Joe notices the date on a magazine, Hot Naked Chicks and World Report, the 3rd of March 2505. On the doctor's desk, matching the date on his bill, Joe finally realizes that 500 years have passed since the army put him in stasis. Alarmed by the sights of a collapsing world, decaying buildings cabled to each other, mountains of garbage, and a freeway ending in a drop-off, Joe flees the hospital, realizing he had awakened in a world in crisis, with the economy in deep neglect. Joe is eventually arrested at a Carl's Jr. junk food vending booth for not paying his hospital bill and for not having a barcode tattoo. At trial, Joe's public defense lawyer is Frito, who incompetently helps convict him, influenced by the prosecutor's insistence that Joe is guilty and his own anger at Joe for damaging his house at the garbage avalanche. Joe is imprisoned, and a poorly designed ID tattoo machine renamed him Not Sure because he hesitated when they asked for his name. The machine then gives him a barcode tattoo with the name "Not Sure." During a mandatory and very simple IQ test, Joe realizes just how foolish humanity has become, being unable to identify shapes. Easily escaping his dim-witted jailers, Joe returns to Frito's apartment and blames him for putting an innocent man in jail. Joe asks if there is a time machine that can help him return to 2005. Frito claims that there is one, but agrees to help only after Joe promises him billions of dollars from a savings account that he will open in the past upon his return. Although Frito cannot grasp the concept of compound interest, he takes Joe's word for it that he will earn $30 billion minus the $20 billion for expenses, making $80 billion, and helps Joe escape from the police. On their way to the time machine, Joe and Frito find Rita. She does not know that she has been asleep for 500 years, until Joe tells her, and even then, she expects Upgrade will find her. Frito leads them to a city-sized Costco. Joe is rearrested after accidentally allowing his barcode to be scanned. However, instead of being sent back to prison, Joe is delivered to the White House this time. President Camacho, having seen Joe's IQ test results and recognizing him as the most intelligent man in the world, recruits him as Secretary of the Interior. Joe is surprised and tells them he is not the most intelligent man in the world, explaining that the test he took was just a simple one. At a press conference, President Camacho is thrilled to announce Joe as the solver of the country's crisis. Joe's task is to address the United States' critical issues: food and crop shortages, the Dust Bowl, a crippled economy, mountains of garbage, and related problems. The other cabinet members are parodies of contemporary politicians, highlighting nepotism, corporate loyalty, corruption, and the excessive emphasis on sex appeal in political media coverage. Joe appoints Frito as his assistant, hoping to use his new powers as Secretary of the Interior to access the time machine and return to 2005. Meanwhile, Rita continues to take money from a random guy, promising him a night. In a cabinet meeting, Joe asks for a moment to confer with his assistant, Frito. Joe instructs Frito to draw a map leading to the time machine. Joe, Frito, and the other members head out to observe the field. Joe observes the field and asks Frito to come and observe also. Joe asks him to hand him the map. Joe sends for Rita, and when she arrives, he learns that she has been imprisoned for taking money from a random person and never puts out. Rita is surprised to see Joe, and he asks for a moment alone with her in the bushes. They all seemed confused by Joe's way of talking until he gave them the finger. Joe and Rita head into the field, aiming to reach the time machine with the help of the map. However, they quickly realize that the map is useless, just an empty sheet of paper with a few random sketches on it. Frustrated, Joe urges Rita to make a run, but she refuses, explaining that her last attempt at running was a bad experience for her. They are quickly interrupted by policemen. Joe discovers that the crops are being sprayed with Brondu, an energy drink, instead of water. Upon inquiry, he learns that water has been replaced by Brondu, the thirst mutilator, which he compares to Gatorade. Brondu, marketed as rich in electrolytes, is being used for virtually everything, including crop irrigation. In an attempt to boost sales, the Brondu Corporation launched a campaign claiming that water was only suitable for toilets. Over time, the electrolytes in Brondu accumulated in the soil, as it is just salt, leading to the demise of the crops and causing a food shortage. After futile attempts to explain to the cabinet that electrolytes are harmful to plants, Joe informs them that he can communicate with plants, and they express their need for water instead of Brondu. Joe then reinstates the practice of watering crops with actual water. Joe stares out the window, hoping something shows up. Rita thanks Joe and tells him he shouldn't sleep on the floor. Joe responds that her boyfriend wouldn't be happy knowing she shared a bed with a stranger. However, overnight, the stock of the Brondu Corporation becomes worthless, leading to widespread unemployment without any visible improvement in the crop situation. The enraged populace riots, and Joe becomes the scapegoat, sentenced to a day of rehabilitation. Essentially, an execution disguised as a public demolition derby, advertised as Monday Night Rehabilitation. Rita visits Joe, and Joe tells her that if she ever reaches the time machine, she should encourage children to study hard and read books so that the world will become a better place before he is taken away. Missing Joe, Rita peers through the window and discovers with wonder that the soil has caused crops to sprout in the fields. To rescue Joe, accompanied by Frito, she bribes a television cameraman to showcase the sprouting crops to the world. However, before reaching the crop field, Frito and the cameraman get sidetracked by a sale at a Starbucks chain brothel franchise. Only after they argue and brawl does Frito remember his duty and capture footage of the crop sprouts. President Camacho witnesses the flourishing new plants on the stadium's big-screen televisions and grants Joe a pardon just as he is about to be incinerated with a flamethrower. At the celebration, Joe decides to stay and contribute to the rebuilding of American civilization. President Camacho appoints him as Vice President of America. Additionally, Joe discovers that the time machine is merely an amusement park ride with a historical theme. In this theme, Charlie Chaplin is depicted as the leader of the Nazi Party who utilized dinosaurs to wage war on the world, and the UN un-Nazi'd the world forever. Joe served a brief term as vice president before being elected as Camacho's successor. He and Rita tie the knot and become parents to the world's 3 brightest children. Meanwhile, Frito marries 8 times and fathers 32 of the world's least intelligent children, echoing the film's introduction. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to support the channel by subscribing.